Hey there, welcome to the Her Business Podcast. I'm Susie Daphnis, I'm the CEO at Her Business, and I am your host. And I'm going to guess if you're listening to this show, then you're probably like women inside of our Growth Network community, and that is, you're probably not a newbie at business. Most of the women who come around us come because they've already been in business for a few years and have reached some benchmarks. And while there are so many amazing things that come with being an established business owner, there's also brand new challenges that emerge that you probably didn't have to deal with when you're in the first few years. And there's a particular kind of exhaustion that tends to come. And it's not the stress of someone who's hustling to figure things out, it's the stress of someone who has figured things out, but somehow is still doing everything. And that exhaustion comes when you've built the business, you've created the team, but the decisions still circle back to you. All the questions still land in your inbox. You are at that central piece of the business. And if you stop, the business stops. You know that something about how the business operates isn't quite right yet, but you don't know what exactly. To talk us through that something that is the solution to what's happening right now, I want to introduce you to a very special woman and a dear friend of mine, Kristin Skinner. She's the founder and CEO of Velocity Co. and one of the world's leading thinkers on how organizations work and don't work. And she's spent over 20 years helping leaders at companies like Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, and Adobe eliminate the invisible friction that quietly consumes our time as leaders. And in today's conversation, she's going to show you how to think about your operating system so that your business can run smoothly without requiring you to be the superhuman holding it all together. Let's welcome Kristin Skinner to the show. Hey, Kristin, great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation, Susie.
I am so excited about this conversation too, because many of the women who are joining us have built solid businesses. They're carrying a lot of responsibility. And a question that I hear often is, why does everything still come back to me? And we're going to talk about that today. You work with leaders to untangle challenges just like that one. And before we dive in, can you briefly share what you do, who you work with, and how you help businesses run more smoothly?
Absolutely. So I'm Kristin Skinner. I founded Velocity Co., where I am also the Chief Experience Officer. So I previously spent about 20 years scaling design organizations in the Fortune 100, anywhere from 30 people all the way up to 12,000 plus people at companies like Expedia Group, Chase, Capital One, Adaptive Path, and Microsoft. And what I learned is that capable leaders aren't failing. They've just built businesses that require them to be superhuman to keep running,
Mm.
which we know is not sustainable. So in my work, I help executives redesign the systems so that the businesses can run like a machine while they get to be human.
I love that. And obviously you come here with a lot of experience. And as you said, a lot of your experience is with very large organizations.
Mhm.
But you and I had a conversation before now, and we are mapping everything across to smaller businesses, the types of businesses that I'm typically working with, because the principles really are the same as we're
Yeah.
scaling. And you talk about work about work. This idea
Mhm.
of work about work actually consuming 60% of leaders' time. So when you look at successful, capable leaders, what does that friction look like day to day, especially in the smaller owner-led businesses?
Yeah, you really nailed it. There's so many commonalities no matter what size you're at. So the first thing that I do, one of the first things is I run a diagnostic called the calendar test. And what that is me asking leaders to pull up last week's calendar or the last 2 weeks of their calendar and just go through and color code everything. So we use a simple system, red, yellow, green. Red is a
Mm.
signal that something needs something is broken. Yellow is a warning and green is, thumbs up, everything's fine. So green is something that moves the business forward. Yellow could be that it requires coordination, probably necessary coordination. But then red is all of the what I call the work about work. And so again, this is at any size and scale. There are meetings about why the meetings aren't working, explanations that should be self-explanatory, follow-ups after the meeting for clarification, and then a lot of repetition. You may have put something out in a Slack channel or over chat or in an email and thought that you addressed it, but the rest of your team and the rest of your organization still needs to go and find that information, and then they interpret it in different ways as well. So in smaller businesses, founders often find that 60 to 70% is actually red. So it's not a time management problem. It's really about the systems architecture. And that's where my work is focused because these patterns exist everywhere. So you're spending more time managing the friction than you are actually creating momentum. And so what that actually looks like from a red day to day, and this may be familiar to many of you. So Tuesday morning, you may feel like you're hitting some momentum and some stride toward your goals for the week, but you find that you're re-explaining a decision that was made 3 weeks ago. Or you're
Mm.
in, you see these back-to-back Slack messages. Who's handling this? Who's on point? What's the decision? Did we move forward? What was the result? Again, the meetings to plan the meetings. Sometimes those are necessary, to be fair. And then the same conversation happening across channels. So across email or Slack or one-on-one and conversation written down, and then redoing the work. And then finally, what you may hear is that you're thinking or you're saying, I spent all week being really busy, but I can't point to what actually moved forward. So in Fortune
Mm.
500 companies, this friction gets absorbed. There's spans of
Right.
control, there are layers, there's middle management, but in a 5-person team, there's nowhere for it to hide. And so that's the work that I do. I really think about the founder becoming the living system, the one who holds the context, makes the decisions, fills all the gaps, and that can work until it doesn't.
Oh my gosh, you said so much there that I can relate to, not only because I've seen it in other people's businesses, but because I've seen it myself. I just had an incident the other day where we were right near the tail end of a campaign and someone said, was almost like, I didn't know about that. I'm like, it was in the original briefing, but somewhere along the way, the system didn't hold so that every person knew what they needed to know. There's something you said that I want to message
Mhm.
back, and that is someone says, I've explained this, we agreed on this, why is this still coming back to me? From a systems perspective, and I love the traffic light system, what's usually missing when communication feels repetitive and effortful?
Such a great question. So common. I think, there's that sentiment about, well, we talked about this. I wrote it down. I sent the email. I've shared this. And you're thinking, did I miss a step? Why am I explaining this again? And we assume it's a people problem, but it's really not. It's not that they're not listening or that they're not engaged. What's actually missing is that the decision has no structural home. So I've given you a traffic light metaphor. Now I'm going to give you a house metaphor. So stick with me on this one. Think of it this way: when you think about a decision, where does it live? Where should it live after the meeting ends? And who owns the next action? What changes in how we work because of this decision? And if something does need to change because of the decision, how do we know if we're following through? And how do we have that sort of move seamlessly into our systems of record? And so the diagnosis is really about most decisions. The situation is that most decisions are communicated, but they're not operationalized. And what I mean by that is they float
Mm,
around, people default back to old patterns, they get it, they clock it, but they might wait for you to remind them, or they might interpret it
yeah.
in a different way than you intended. And so I've actually worked with a couple of CEOs, one of whom said to me, I explained our client prioritization framework. It has to be at least 5 times. And so when we mapped it, so again, another diagnostic, we mapped it and we realized what was missing was that the framework lived in a Slack thread from several months ago, similar to your example, Susie, where you had shared it and documented it, but people didn't quite know where to find it or they had forgotten that it lived there. Um, it could be that there's no decision record as to the why. Sometimes people remember the rationale,
Mm,
or they need the rationale to remember the outcome and the reason or the action. And then there's ownership, and the ownership is a big one because we'll talk about this I'm sure in our conversation. But ownership needs to be distributed, and so we don't really need better communication. It's not that the communication's not clear; it's that the structural home doesn't quite exist, or it's not quite finished, or like you've built the roof before the foundation. So three quick things to summarize. First is
sure.
a decision record, and that's, making sure that it's not buried in Slack, or it make sure that it's visible and present. There's clear ownership. Multiple people may think that they own that decision or that action. So repeating that, making sure that the decision can actually stick. And then the feedback loop, really important. Sometimes people miss the feedback loop, or the feedback loop is just one person. It could be just Susie Inc. Like, oh, we gave Susie the feedback. Well, if that's not really operationalized, if people are giving you, ping ponging you with
Right.
information that's not super actionable. But when all of those conditions exist and all of those activities exist together, then the communication becomes more of a reference, and it's not all about just making sure that you're following a playbook. It's really thinking about the structure and filling in the gaps where your house is not complete.
I want to pick up on exactly that,
Yeah.
the metaphor you've used and also this idea, because a lot of leadership, training or information I see is about
Mhm.
motivation and mindset and the
Yeah.
why, but you focus more on structure. You've already given us a couple of examples, roles, systems.
Yeah.
Why does the design of those things matter more than motivation once a business hits a particular stage?
Yeah. I love this question for two reasons. One is that this is something that leaders and particularly women leaders often struggle with is we're told that leadership is about inspiration. It's about vision. It's about communication so that you're rallying the team behind you and your idea. And that definitely matters, especially in the beginning when you're building something new or you're pivoting. What is almost equally important is doing the assessment of capabilities and structure. Like, what is it going to take for this idea to become realized? What does that system look like? What does the structure look like that's going to get us from where we are today to what our ambition says we can do? Because there's the belief in it and that motivation, which will get you to 500K or more, hopefully. But the structure is what's going to get you into the multi millions. It's also what's going to hold you back. So there's a layer to these framework. There's a layered framework that I use in any role that I've ever been in, whether I'm leading teams of 12,000 people at a 250,000 person company like JP Morgan Chase, or I'm leading a small agency of 30 people and then taking our 10xing our revenue and then getting
Mm,
acquired and going into a new environment like I did at Capital One. It's the people, it's the practice, which is the work, and then it's the programs, which is basically your roadmap. So I'll break that down a little bit more. The people is
okay.
really kind of the who does what, who decides what does the decision right framework look like, and what's the role clarity and role charter? Because we know that that changes over time. So how often are we revisiting it? How often are we incenting people to expand in their careers? That's the people. The practice piece, how we work, our operating rhythms, our workflows. Imagine you're in a company that then merges with another company. We may
Mm,
think that we're kind of business as usual, and then those two things can collide, and that can create a lot of
right.
chaos and really slow down that vision, right? And then the programs. And the programs is literally what we're doing day to day. That's the what are we delivering? What do our products and services look like? What are our outputs? And that's what's really tangible and visible because you can see it. So, with an imbalance across people, practice, and programs, we find ourselves sometimes spinning. We find duplicate work. We find that
Right.
we're backsliding. And as leaders, we can get frustrated because we're like, why aren't people listening to me? I'm so clear on
Right.
where we're going.
Mm.
That's where leaders can get stuck. And so, what wins over that motivation, or what really sort of enhances that motivation, is that motivated people can still make great decisions, but if they're not empowered to know what they're deciding, that can be a challenge. So the bottom line is, like, once you're past that startup stage and your job isn't to motivate harder, motivate more, more motivation, it's to design the system where people can actually do their best work without needing you to be the spark every single day. It's not less human, it's just actually more sustainable for everybody, including business owners.
Mm. And I imagine and have experienced that then once you get into more the structure,
Mhm.
you can circle back to the motivation because
Yeah,
things are flowing, things
that's
are
right.
predictably, the outcomes are more predictable. Then you can move back to some of those other areas.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned and that I referenced earlier is that I truly believe the women who are watching or listening are really thoughtful decision makers.
Mhm.
Yet decisions, and we've talked about that a little bit already, keep circling back. So
Yeah.
when we look at the structure, what is happening when decisions aren't actually sticking?
Yeah.
And what changes that
Yep.
pattern?
Yep. There's definitely some patterns here. And I can share a couple of examples. It's again, I think it's a structural challenge, and it could
Mm.
have many different reasons why it happens this way. So I won't over index on that. I'll talk a little bit more about the structure itself. So there's probably ambiguity, and it's typically in one of three areas. And I mentioned
Mhm.
already decision rights, and that sounds very formal, but it's an important distinction. It's an important declaration to have because, again, things can change over time. You hope that they do. Your hope, if you're in growth mode, the decisions you're making on day one or at a certain revenue point are going to be very different from the decisions you're making at your next achievable milestone and beyond that. There'll be similar things, but really you want to make sure that it's clear about who can make a decision and at what level, and then who needs to be consulted versus informed. And there's frameworks out
Mm.
there. There's DACES, which is a decision framework that you can go and reference, and I can share links for that. But really, for example, like if the team is deciding on a new client onboarding process, but the founder keeps overriding it for whatever
Mm.
reason, because she's not sure if she designated authority or not. She wants to maintain that authority. Like that's a great example of needing a handoff protocol and really understanding kind of, all right, decisions made. And from here forward, it's Susie's domain. But then what? So really thinking about that end to end. Um, and then the consequence piece, and this is true in life as much as it is in business. Um, there's should be a consequence for not following through. And
Mm.
often we as leaders expect our teams to behave as quote unquote adults, figure it out for themselves. Of course, we're equipping and empowering our team members, but we're still the leader. So we really need to be clear about like what it means if we don't do X. So if
Mm.
ignoring the decision, for example, is easier than implementing it, people will drift back, right? You'll drift back into your old habits, your old way of doing things, because the past path of least resistance is backwards, or it's staying, keep
Right.
doing what you're doing.
What you're doing.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, but what got us here isn't going to get us there. So again, there's an analysis or a diagnostic you can use, which is around decision velocity test, which is the DACY that um, I already referenced. But really, pull up a decision. Here's an example: pull up a decision that was made 3 months ago. You can do this today. Map its journey. Think about how long it took to make that decision. How many times did you have to discuss it and relitigate it? Is it actually implemented in a positive
Mm.
way? And did it stay decided or did it drift back? So we could do that today. And then you have your diagnosis, right? You can decide what action to take going forward. So if it gets relitigated and it didn't stick, then you're not refining the engine. You need to rebuild. We're not just doing small tweaks here. We need to kind of reassess the system and figure out kind of why is it breaking down and why is information not flowing. So what it can change for you is really about um, figuring out like, are you having to make decisions repeatedly? Which ones
Mm.
should be a one-time system decision? And then who owns that implementation? So hopefully you're starting to see some themes here around roles and responsibilities and behaviors, and less, those are the people pieces, but really around the structure and the system. Like what systems do we have in place that are repeatable, that are actually helping our people versus holding them back?
I really believe, as I know you do, that really systems and structures, frameworks, they're the things that allow us to leverage in
Yeah.
our business. And so, when we're just starting out in business, we have often so much excitement, enthusiasm, everything's kind of built on our adrenaline and our
Yeah.
whatever. But that gets depleted after a while when you've got multiple people, lots of decisions to make. And that is where the foundations need to be strong systems. And so
Hmm.
I love that that is such a key focus, and that that is what you've used to see huge transformation and growth in businesses.
Yeah.
And one of the systems that you've created is an operating plan framework that when I saw it, I thought, oh, we must talk about this. And it brings
Yeah.
together vision, principles, some of the, the I don't want to say softer things because they're very important to have, but also then brings in, well, okay, this is where we're going, but what is the strategy? And then what is the roadmap? And so for a woman who doesn't want one more planning document, how could she think about a living operating system, something that supports her every month, every week?
Yeah. Yep. I think about the operating system less in a pragmatic, programmatic way, even though the words operating and system indicate that it's very structured. It's a For me, it's a guiding force, let's say. It's a decision tool. It can become your answer key to many different questions.
Mhm.
So if you're seeking answers for, is this on our roadmap? Does it move
Mm.
toward our vision? Does it align with our principles? For example, like we prioritize depth over breadth, or we want to work for companies that are doing good for the environment. Does this fit that criteria? Is it on our strategic path? Does it fit into our roadmap near term, midterm, long term? It helps guide answers to those really important questions on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a quarterly basis. So you can really, again, use it as your like quote unquote answer key. And so
Mm.
the way to do that is to really make it a living, breathing document, and embed, kind of set it and forget it in some ways, but in other ways use it regularly. So what I mean by that is you can update it when it really shifts. So, for example, you have a new business opportunity, or you're getting signals from the market. Going back to that feedback loop um, reference that I made, when you're seeing market conditions shift, when you're seeing AI and new tools and new technologies come to market, and you're really trying to analyze and think about how that applies to your business, you can look at your operating system. And again, you outlined it beautifully, Susie, when you talked about the four components. It is the vision, it's the principles, it's your strategy and your roadmap, and you can overlay diagnostics onto that. I have a diagnostic around 12 qualities of effective organizations. I originally
Mm.
created that for my book, Org Design for Design Orgs, but it scales beautifully because it's foundation, output, and management. And you guessed it, like, don't try to do output and management without first focusing on the foundation. So you can
Right.
look at that and you can do a quick analysis about your own organization and see how effective it is across 12 dimensions in those three categories very easily with a red, yellow, and green system. So it really is the core. It can be the core driver for many different things, whether you're starting a new initiative, you're building a new product and service, you're starting a new business.
I like simplicity and clarity. And when I saw the
Mhm.
visual of the operating system, I immediately thought, oh, okay, that I think people can get their head around. So we'll throw up a visual of what that looks like. And if there's
Mhm.
resources that Kristin is mentioning that are available to you, I'll be sure to mention that a little later in today's episode. Um, One of the situations that I've seen women come to, especially when they've been in business for a while, and perhaps going back to a house analogy, the difference between having an architecturally designed home where you start from scratch and you build it perfectly, to having a business or a home where you start adding on rooms and you end up with this kind of weird shape. And sometimes you have to go down the hall and three doors to the left to get to where you want to go. Sometimes we can build businesses that are like that. So how do we know whether we need to just tweak the business
Yeah.
to get it to get closer to our vision, or whether we need to rethink how the whole thing operates?
Yeah, this is such an important question because many leaders wait too long, right? We
Mhm.
sit with these decisions and considerations, and then we get more information, and then we sort of go back and look at it from a different angle potentially. But sometimes we keep tweaking when we need to just rethink. So there's that engine
Right.
metaphor again, right? Do we need to rebuild, or do we need to refine? Do we need to tweak the parts? The foundation works. Like, here's an example about just tweaking. If the foundation works, but there are specific friction points, then you can point to 2 to 3 clear problems. That's an easier path. Fixing those doesn't require changing everything else. It
Mm.
could be project intake. It could be um, the way that you're thinking about account management, the way that you're thinking about new business development. You can tweak that if other things are working really well that you actually don't want, that are related, and you don't want to mess those up, like um, opportunity cost, and you're thinking about your margins. You have some clearly defined levers, right? When you're rebuilding and thinking about the whole system, you're the whole system. Guess what?
Mm.
You, the founder, gets to be center stage. And that may not be the
Yeah.
most comfortable place for you, but really it does start and end with you. So that's an important recognition and a really important starting point. If you step away and everything breaks, then you probably need to rethink your whole system. If you can't take a Friday off
Yeah.
and there aren't 5 emergencies because people are waiting on you, or they needed you, or that you were not reachable, that's a pretty clear signal that you need to really rethink your system. Um, You also, one of the things that we often don't do is that we look back to look forward, and meaning if your business has changed significantly or grown significantly, like 3 times over 3 years, but you haven't changed your operating model, you haven't really
Mm,
gone back and looked at the systems that got you there, now's a really great time to do that. Um, Especially if you're thinking, I'm the only one who knows the answer to this, or I'm the only
yeah.
one who knows where the pieces fit it together and why. And it's not just about delegation. It's really about making the implicit explicit and showing kind of others, informing them, showing them, bringing them along. Um, yeah, I would say there's one more thing I think is
Mm.
important in this context that I just want to bring back up, which is around that decision velocity test. Um, if the same types of decisions keep coming just to you or coming back to you, like client prioritization, resource allocation, scope, um, those are not just individual decisions. That's an indication of bigger architectural problems, right? If you're not deciding if you're being asked to decide at every one of those stage gates,
Yes.
then that means that you're compensating for something that's missing.
And I know how exhausting that can
And
be.
it's exhausting. Exactly. Yes.
And having the aha moment to say, you know what, I just need to step back,
Yeah.
take the time to actually redesign. And as the owner, I can do that and
You
I
can
can
do
put
that.
in place change.
Yeah.
But I need to give myself the space, the headspace, and the time to actually just rethink. As you said, this keeps coming back to me. Notice the pattern and then pause long enough to go, well, what structurally needs to change? Because I've
Right.
grown 3 times over 3 years, or I used to have 2 team members, now I have 22. Things that need to be different. And some of that sounds obvious, but sometimes we're so busy in the busyness of the business that we actually don't take time to say, you know what, this organism is not what it was. What it needs,
Yeah.
my role in it, that all needs to change.
Yeah.
Um, as we said, you work mostly with CEOs and executive teams,
Yeah.
but the women here sometimes have just a few people. What is a blind spot that you see in experienced women at this stage that everything we've been talking about, this organizational design, will resolve? I said exhausting, but I'm sure you have a whole lot more insight than that.
I could talk about this one topic and this one question for at length. But in the interest of time, I will just say that I see this very, very often. The blind spot that I see most often is that experienced women are exceptionally good at compensating. So we've spent our careers, whether we've worked in-house in executive roles, whether we've been practitioners, we run our own businesses, we are the glue, we read the room,
Mm,
we fill the gaps, we anticipate those gaps before they happen. And we're really, really good at anticipating problems and challenges and thinking about things both strategically and practically. And I know that that's a pretty broad generalization, but I feel somewhat confident saying it out loud because I've seen it to be true. Um, and it's a blind spot, which is also a strength because sometimes we don't realize that we've become that invisible infrastructure
mm.
until we put it into our own business, and then we realize, like, what is how can I be the only one? And I know that's not true because we hire great people, we expect them to do great work, we think that we are, we invest in our people, and we want to see them be successful because that shared success helps everybody. um, but I think most importantly, it's again that moment to sort of self reflect and realize, like, knowing who to ask for what, and empowering others. So if you're translating between team members, or if you're sensing something's off and you're often course correcting, and most importantly, if you're holding all of the context, it's probably because you're really good at it, but it also means that the business never develops its own systems. It's not
Mm.
going to be able to then potentially grow or become acquisition ready if that's one of your goals, and
Yeah.
it's going to hold you back from scale for sure because you are the scale. And that can
Yeah.
feel literally very heavy. So, if those connections live in your head and the decision making patterns live in your judgment, then I can bring up that house metaphor one more time and then I'll leave it. But the team can only be as good as the house that it lives in.
Mm.
So you said it beautifully, Susie. Like, we don't want to send people down the wrong corridor or down the wrong hallway. Or, oh, guess what? We open this door and like, don't go in that room. Trust me. We need to keep that door closed. Um, if you feel like you're the hallway between the rooms or you're the connective tissue, literally, like that means that inflammation can't flow without you and the decisions can't made. They stall out or they are unclear. They don't stick without your reinforcement. There's the metaphor about the carrot or the stick. Do you want to be the stick in the
Mm.
environment that you've built? No, I don't think maybe some of us do, but not all the time. But really, like that context really does need to transfer without your translation, especially if it's your IP. So
Right.
if you drew your org chart honestly, not aspirationally, not the one that you wish that you had, would every single box connect back to you?
Mm.
It's not a delegation failure. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's just that the architecture is not quite there. So now
Right.
you know where to focus. And so you don't want to be the one carrying message from room to room to room to room. You need to be able to set it up so that you have I'm sorry, I'm metaphor on metaphor today, but like you
That's
need to
okay.
figure out like your intercom system, right? Whatever it is. But really it's very simple. It's making the invisible visible.
Mm.
That's the idea. That's the simple part. The f- the way to do that, there's many ways to do anything, but the way I believe to do that is about the decision mapping, role clarity, and then really understanding knowledge transfer. So what
Mm.
context lives in your head that you really want to make sure that you're sharing back out.
Oh, the depth of your knowledge on this area. I'm just so excited and so thrilled that you're here. Let's paint the
Thank you.
picture of what it could be like. So,
Yeah.
when the operating system is working and roles are clear and decisions flow and that friction is
Mhm.
reduced, how does leadership feel different for the woman who's at the center of her
Yeah,
business?
such a great question. I love the positivity. Okay, so your Monday morning is going to feel different if you start your day on a Monday, because you're going to open your calendar and it's not going to be wall to wall firefighting. It's not going to be just you going in and having to, you know, rechart or redirect or provide critical information that only you can provide. You're going to have that space to think. Your decision making is certainly going to feel different because people aren't waiting for you. They're using the system, and then the system gets stronger the more you use it. It gets smarter over time. So they're referencing the principles, they're checking the roadmap, they're, calling out areas where like there's maybe duplicate effort happening that maybe was something that only you saw previously, but now they have visibility into that and they're able to behave in a different way to actually move all of the ideas forward, move different teams that maybe were working independently forward, um, and making calls within their domain without having to sort of check again, check back. So the energy is going to feel different because you're not the shock absorber and you're not the translator of everything. And then your Friday afternoon, if you're doing a Monday through Friday stretch, maybe we're doing Monday through Sunday, no judgment, but you can actually step away. So the business doesn't pause when you're not watching it. And so what some of the things that I hear from leaders in my practice is that they say I can finally work on the best business instead of being consumed by
Mm.
it. That's a fairly common one that you've probably heard or felt. My team is making decisions without me, and that feels great. And then the one thing I hear the most is that sometimes it's literally about getting your time back. Like I took Friday
Yes.
afternoon off, or I'm going to take Friday afternoon off, and nothing broke, nothing's going to break, and it's not a small thing. That's a marker. That's the hallmark of a business that's
Mm.
graduated from founder dependent to systems powered.
A few months back, I was working on a new tagline for our podcast, and you were very much a part of helping me cement
Yeah.
the tagline that ended up being your business, your rules, building a business that works for you. And as we close out and you leave us with anything else
Yeah.
you want to say before we go, I would love it if you would tell me your thoughts about that, your business, your rules, and how it applies to what we've been talking about here today.
I love that. I think, we wear many different hats as leaders. And so if you spend a little bit of time thinking about what that means for you, um, because what I'm sharing with you isn't just about getting your systems in place and your operating model and all of the terminology around it, your organizational system structure. It's really about you as a human and what's most valuable to you and what you're capable of providing. So it's really not just about your capabilities, but it's getting that really, really important time back so that you can then you can turn and put it back into the business. You can put it into the places that it matters the most. So it's not reactive, it's proactive. And then you'll see how your business truly shifts because it'll again be moved from being founder dependent to being much more proactive and systems powered. So I think before we wrap, I want to leave with a few different thoughts. Um, the things that I shared today, even though they may have resonated with you, and some of the anecdotes around, 60% or 70% of your calendar might look red, or we spend all of this time on work about work. It sounds a little bit overwhelming, or it could, but no one's failing at leadership. I mean, number one, you've stepped into this role and you're doing it. So
Mm.
congratulations on that. That's huge. Not everybody can do that. It's really a matter of just re-examining your business and thinking about the stage that it's in and the stage you want to get to. And you may have outgrown its original operating system, which is very, very natural. It's not a success problem at all. It's just a capacity challenge. Where are we spending our capacity? So let's redesign our systems, number one. Um, I would say if you're sitting there thinking, I need to map this in my own business, Susie is going to share some examples and some diagnostics that you can put into practice right away that will hopefully be low overhead. There's also a diagnostic called the organizational X-ray that I use, which really makes that invisible friction visible. It maps where the
Mm.
friction lives and where the decisions get stuck. So you can learn more about that on my site. And then the final thought I have is really about capable leaders. And we talked about women and some of our superpowers, but the problem again is never capability. We know that we can learn. We know that we've got all of these great talents to share. It's that we've sometimes built our businesses and then realized that they require superhuman abilities to keep it running. And none of us are
Mhm.
superhuman, not that I know of. So the solution's not to become more superhuman. It's really to build a system that lets you be human while the business runs like a machine.
Kristin, I adore you. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been
Thank
such a
you.
treat. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Loved being here.
I love that conversation. And what Kristin has given us is the gift of thinking about restructuring. If things keep coming back to you, it's the structure around your leadership that hasn't caught up yet. So this is an architectural shift, and so it's doable, it's solvable. It doesn't take a massive amount of inner work to make these changes. It's not a mindset thing, it's actually structure. And I want to invite you to sit with one question from this session, and that is, where in your business does the decision have no structural home? Where does it always end up back on your desk? Not because it should, but because there's nowhere else for it to go. That is your starting point. Now, I would love for you to explore more of Kristin's work, including her free business diagnostics test and all her other gold. Over in the show notes page for this episode, I'm going to put links to where you can connect with Kristin. I want to thank her because she's a sweetheart. I want to thank her for joining me today and sharing her amazing knowledge with us. And I want to thank you for listening. And I want to say that if you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you left us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, or leave us a message on Spotify, or send us a direct message on Instagram. And if you're not following us on Instagram, do. We're always posting little tidbits that I think you'll enjoy. And we're Her Business at Instagram. On our website at herbusiness.com/371, you're going to find a summary of today's episode and links to any resources we've discussed. And if you haven't been to our website in the last couple of weeks, we have a brand new website. Easier to find things, lots of great value, lots of great free resources. So head on over to herbusiness.com. And if you go to herbusiness.com/371, you'll find the notes for this episode with Kristin. If you're new to the show, you're just discovering us, thank you so much for being here. Click follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And wherever you joined us from, I hope you'll join us for the next episode For more inspiring stories and lessons from successful female entrepreneurs, we've got some great episodes coming up. And if you're not part of the Growth Network and you want to be part of a community that's going to help you build your business by your rules so that you can create more leverage and freedom, come join us inside the Growth Network. You can head over to herbusinessnetwork.com and get access right away. We are welcoming women right now, and we'd love to see you on the inside. That's all for today. I'll see you next week right here on the Her Business podcast. Bye for now.